Hello.
Hey.
Mind being the note taker this week.
Thanks, Jason.
We're just waiting a couple minutes for probably Lockie. Anybody else?
Lucky pinged on the side. I don't know whether he'll be able to make it.
Oh, okay.
He was asking if somebody can share it today.
Sure. I don't mind also doing that unless somebody is eager to.
I can share if you take notes.
Okay.
Okay. Tell me when to start.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, this is the OCI reference types working group. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Very happy to see everyone here. Just this meeting is recorded. Please be civil and nice to each other. And with that, let's look at the agenda items. First up is the pull request for proposal E changes. And the object of this agenda item is to merge in changes to proposal E that this group would be willing to take to the spec maintainers. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
that's the goal we have agreed on.
Okay. I can share my screen if y'all want to take a look at the pull request. Like maybe that would help.
Sure.
Okay. And I can't share.
Maybe I can share it one second. Also no.
I wonder if that, so I've been having that problem with my Linux client, and I wonder if that's, something to do with where we've installed the Linux client from. I think I remember that I installed it from the Snap store. Anyway, digression. Josh, go ahead. You're on mute.
Josh, you're muted. Yeah, thanks. I looked at this yesterday. So I just want to confirm, and I think this was on the Thursday call. We talked about this. We will be using the extensions API. Is that what I see here?
I believe that's right.
Okay.
I think that's possibly still a topic for discussion. I don't know if we settled on it, but I think a possible compromise is to prototype it using the extensions API and, you know, get a feel for how everything looks. And then when we have an extension, it's a fairly small diff to just say, this is, you know, map this URL to this URL. Everything else works the same. But I don't know if, you know, I think Sajay was the most outspoken person in favor of the extension. I don't know if that plan works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pre-qualified with the bias because I did kind of like support the PR for getting the extensions. And we did bring it up in the last OCI call to kind of ask where should we go. And I think Mike also kind of commented, Mike Brown kind of commented that let's prototype it in this place, see if it goes, and then make it into a regular path as needed. So there's no strong objection as to moving it to a regular path, but getting some validation on the extension quickly might be the least friction.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm rereading the PR and it has, I just put it in the chat, but it says working group testing API extensions, proposed API for distribution spec, no extensions. So I'm totally fine with that. I just want to be on the same page for the prototyping efforts.
I'll calm myself with my hand raised. So Sajay, do you think that having another registry provider join you in, you know, implementing the extensions to show viability, would that help move extensions over to spec change?
Yes, because over the last week, I was actually checking Zot's implementation.
Mm-hmm.
They have gone ahead and implemented a set of extensions like storing scan results and different kinds of operations. I think there are like 4 extensions that they already implemented specifically for Zot. It gives them an easier way so that paths don't stomp over. OCI is special because I think as the OCI group, we can sit under any place and just rep the spec. But it's just being conscious of other people who have capabilities that they've built over distribution and being mindful of not kind of stomping over their path. That is the motivation. So the other thing is that the OCI Discover is actually implemented as an OCI extension. So it's not that OCI does not have extensions. It's more like, this is the playground, this is the experimental way. Let's get it in there. Let's test it out there without actually having to write a full distribution spec. And then if we like it, we can immediately kind of ratify distribution and say that let's move the path down. It's just a URL change. The advantage is that we can route it directly in different, I mean, if you have different things like how to route your protocols, then it makes it easier to kind of like have everything under this prefix move to this specific thing. So both proposals kind of like say that either we move it under references or under extensions.
Okay.
I'm open to feedback. Like if the group says that let's move it directly on a distribution, let's do that. Like I said, whatever makes it easy to kind of make it into distribution is what I'm hoping we can get done. There's no strong opinion either way.
So go ahead, Jason, sorry.
I was going to say, I guess I'm worried that if we only propose an OCI extension, that distribution spec will just say, you know, we don't care, do whatever you want. It's an extension, and it will make our work product a little less real, as opposed to being like, you know, we can demonstrate here is an extension here, you know, go play with it. You can use it right now. Right. Imagine if all the URLs were instead of this, and it's a lot easier to say like, this is a prototype, you know, this is a working example, but we want a distribution change.
Yes, I think that's what the spec calls out, right? Like we prototype as an extension, we kind of get an RC1 alpha something, and then we can immediately say this is all good. We like the spec. Parties who are using it have a good sense of it. And if everybody says, let's move it over, it makes the problem is, my hope is that we don't have to move it twice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I want to do one URL change. We experiment, we get that, and then we move it over to everybody agrees from the maintainers group saying that this is the name that we want because references, all those kind of discussions will happen. And we
Yeah.
make them move one time. That's what I
1000%. Yeah, 1000%.
Okay, so I've raised my hand up. I'm wondering like how this can be, how I suppose for lack of a better term, the popularity of a particular extension can be demonstrated to the distribution spec maintainers. So how do we say like, okay, this organization has adopted this list of, these set of organizations have adopted these set of extensions. Therefore, we think that this is needed in the spec.
I don't know if that's necessarily the argument we want to make, or the argument that would be most persuasive to distribution spec. I think it's not about like, look at how many production registries currently support this API right now. Please let us put it in the spec. I think it's more like it will sort of be a speculative spec change. Like, we think this is a good addition to the spec, even though perhaps nobody implements it or very few people. And then I'm sure we'll have a hashing of back and forth of ideas and rewordings and things. And then at the end of it, then we use its inclusion in distribution spec as a lever to get registries to implement it, to get all the registries to implement it. If some support it before we take it to distribution spec as an extension, then great. And I think that's some signal, but I don't think the goal is to get broad adoption and then take it to distribution spec, but rather some adoption and a prototype you can use to distribution spec, and then from there get everybody else. Does anyone, let me know if people disagree with that assessment or plan or whatever.
I mean, I'm okay with however it gets adopted. The trouble here, I feel, is that distribution spec will not adopt it because it's in extensions, and extensions does not overlap with all their operations.
Right.
So
yeah.
They see, I mean, and when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about it more in terms of Docker versus everyone else. I mean, to be perfectly blunt there.
Sure, Sajay has his hand up first.
I cannot do anything about Docker up. that's their operation, their company, as we want to call it, right? The thing I do want to call out is, my hope is that the next working group comes along, we set a path so that they don't have to battle of how they can make a change to the OCI spec going forward. We set a trend as to, okay, you experiment here, others can adopt it quickly, and then we move on. And this is the proposal path. That is what I'm hoping for. So every time if we propose like a spec change, distributed change directly from the working group, there's no path to validate whether this is usable or not. For example, the spec right now in the current shape, we have no filtering. And that's one thing that I put in the notes. We probably want to at least discuss what is the base minimum viable use case of, I have 100 scan results or 100 signatures. How do I at least be able to distinguish without pulling down the entire set? Should we talk about that? And maybe the proposal will be that this is fine and we take it forward. And at the time of saying that the working group is happy, there are implementations, we want to move it forward into distribution, we can move it directly under / references or something like that. And we agree as a group to do that. The same process can be taken to the next one, because I think there was a lot of interest on making search happen, right? Can I find images with certain annotations and all these things? And how can we kind of like wrap these things going forward? Just want to set that machine moving also, rather than just making this the final outcome of the workflow is important also. That's what I wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I agree. I think our goal is to make a change and to show future us's how to make a change, so that this is not such a laborious, time sensitive process, time intensive process. To the point about Docker supporting it, or anyone, really any registry supporting it, we can't make anybody support it. And I will say, I think there is a risk that, though we are a broad set of folks and are making a very deliberative change, any registry operator who wants to can implement their own version of references completely in a vacuum. If Docker went and just decided, like, I'm going to go do our own references thing, I think it would probably cause a lot of difficulty for us personally. Not because whatever they build would be bad and we wouldn't just follow it anyway, but it would be very, well, I'll say annoying to me if after all of this work, Docker just comes up with their own thing, and because of the realities of the world, we all just implement it anyway. Oh, hey, Lockie's here. I will cede my time. I think Nisha's next.
So the reason why I asked that question is whether to figure out whether the reason for having so much of trouble turning this into a spec change, and maybe I am misinterpreting this, whether we are going in the direction of we'll just implement these things as extensions, and if and whatever happens in distribution spec happens in distribution spec. These will be completely separated from that. Is that the direction we're going, or is the direction we will implement these things in as extensions for now, and then at a later date we will propose the changes as spec changes? So from the nodding, it seems like we want the latter.
Yeah, my interpretation is definitely the latter. And in fact, I would propose that we not make two sets of proposals to distribution spec. I think we in this group decide this is what we think a good set of functionality is. Show it working as an OCI extension so that anybody who wants to can go and poke and see it in real life. And then take that to distribution maintainers and say, here is a working version as an OCI extension. We would not propose exactly the OCI extension because we want an actual v2 URL, but that this is how it works. Just imagine the URL instead of _foo, it's /v2, etc., or something like that.
So we've decided that we're doing the latter. Now I want to explore what that looks like. Does that look like different organizations forking distribution spec and implementing the set of changes that they want, or what does that look like?
I don't think each organization makes a change to the spec themselves. I think we agree about what the shape of this change is, and somebody implements it somewhere on Zot or distribution or their own hacked registry or whatever, as an OCI with OCI extension paths, and then we make one unified distribution spec change with all of our, with a united front, as this working group agrees we like this change.
So this is where I'm having like misgivings about, leaving it up to implementers to do whatever changes they want. Because, well, so here we have like several people who are representing different companies. They all have customers. The customers have use cases. We've listed all the use cases. Are each of us going to go back to our companies and say, well, this is the decision that this working group has made. They've decided that, each of us go and implement our own extensions. And the response is probably going to be, and then what?
Again, I don't think each of us is implementing a different thing. I think each of us is implementing the thing we all agree on.
Okay. So implementing the thing that we all agree on, where is that reference?
I think
Currently, that's proposal E. Currently, I think we are all iterating on proposal E as the thing we are going to eventually propose.
So
that's what we talked about 2 weeks ago, I think, was that E was the one we're going to start.
Right. But is that going to be on, for example, OCI Playground?
No, it currently the path is underscore OCI. The extension is an OCI extension. What we are saying is that this will be referred as something that the OCI working group is proposing. It's something that we can experiment and show that yes, it works. And once it's working and we have a set of clients and maybe reference implementations or something like that, then we can say that we're happy with this and move it over to distribution as a specification.
Okay.
That's the part.
Do those code changes live in a single location? Is that OCI Playground?
I believe Josh was making some prototype changes in OCI Playground to, I forget whether it was Zot or distribution, but that is not any sort of official location. That is a place where someone can do this. You can go do that somewhere else if you want to. So long as at the end of this, I think we as a group have one thing we say, this is a demonstration of the thing we are proposing to distribution spec as a single group.
I feel like having a number of contributors to one repo would demonstrate that there's a bunch of code that's shared by many different organizations, and downstream it would make us easier. It would make it easier to port those changes up to distribution.
Not everyone is based on distribution. So it's not even feasible to say that if we implement this in distribution, that it will necessarily filter down to.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's for the spec. The distribution spec, not distribution itself.
Yeah. We're only going to make one PR to distribution spec.
Yeah,
go ahead.
The OCI Playground niche, I think, is that was my kind of proposal as the home for these types of group PRs or group changes. So we could do the distribution thing in a niche or maybe we could have the distribution spec maintainers make us a branch there. But OCI Playground was just something that is easy to type in the browser. So
yeah, that works for me, having OCI Playground being the place where we submit PRs to implement the changes we agree on. Lucky has his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say, whatever the name, it would be good for us to have a reference implementation of the extension that, we could all collaborate on in a shared space, and that can be, implemented via the extension model under distribution. Or if somebody they're not using distribution, they might want to look at the code for the implementation. But we would do that post proposal. I don't know that we need to rock up with the actual reference implementation. I know Josh has already started working on that, but I would ask for a space and say, whether it's under distribution where it's, reference implementation extensions, and this is the one for reference types. And then at least, we have one we can collaborate on together. And then if anybody else wants to take the spec and implement it another way, then that's fine.
To add to what you're saying, I think that part of the reason of the reference implementation or like the OCI playground is this proposal E or whatever we're going to do is like good in theory. And we think it will work fine. So I think if we actually use some real projects and make sure that it does work, and the Aura stuff has shown that like it can be done in some way, but I think once we find the issues, we can then bake that into the ultimate proposal, or amend proposal E until it's like in a good shape.
Okay, I think it was Sajay, then Jason.
No, I think Jason first.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to sort of call time on this discussion because we have other stuff about the filtering and artifact type and other stuff. But I don't mean to cut anybody off if they had things to say. I just think we've got an agenda to think of.
Sajay?
To kind of like, maybe time is important. So let's do that. I also shared a PR where over last week, we created proposal E's like a sample way to like implement it on top of distribution, create an extension, use like raw SCTP just to get it working. We have a sample repo with like the spec that is in proposal E converted to a set of Golang files also so that we can reference and play with it. Just to get an idea of how this feels over time. That's something that we can reflect. If we want to move on to the second part of the discussion about filtering, the question primarily was, right now there is no filtering in proposal E, and I think we should merge what is there, like as a PR, because it's just adds to what it is. It doesn't take away anything and doesn't change the course of things. Should we have a basic viable implementation where you can filter something? And that is one of the reasons why in Prop A we submitted at least artifact type, because adding a full-blown annotation filtering is definitely challenging for anybody to implement at this point in time. That's what I wanted to kind of like ask the group.
I think I have my legacy hand up. That's fine. And this is another reason why I asked like that original question. If there was another like implementer, registry implementer that came in and tried to do this, would that strengthen the proposal?
I don't think it would hurt the proposal.
Well,
I
so
agree. I think the more people that implement it, better state will be in. Right.
yeah, so I'm asking because I have to justify my time spent here.
It has been justified.
Considering that I haven't implemented anything.
Nisha, there's plenty to be done if you can have your people sign off on things, reach out to me. There's tons of stuff.
Okay. I think Sajay's frozen. Jason?
Yeah, I wanted to go to Sajay's question about, or Sajay's point about artifact type filtering. I don't have a particular thing against it. I think there's the use case that always comes up seems to be what if there's a vulnerability scan every day? And so there's, after 3 years, there's 1,000 thingies in the registry pointing at this image. Artifact type filtering wouldn't really help there, right? Because if you have 1,000 things of type vulnerability scan, then filtering out the, the 1 or 2 signatures or the 1 or 2 SBOMs isn't really going to save you a lot. I wonder if this solution is to recommend people not poop something into the registry every day, especially if it's like more or less the same information as yesterday, or presumably, today's vulnerability scan is probably the same as yesterday's. I wonder what folks think about that. That's either a question directly to Sajay or anyone else who has any response.
Michael?
I mean, I guess I think that's one option of just having people either not do that, or whenever they push a new thing, delete the old thing. One thing we talked about is we could use the push time or the created at time as a sort field. And so if you have sorting and you have this filtering, a single dimension of filtering, you can actually, I think, accomplish most of the use cases we're talking about without having to go full on, any annotation, which I think just presents a little bit too much of a hurdle for people to implement.
Yeah, nothing in distribution does anything with push time today, or nothing in distribution spec. I don't think the push time is even mentioned as a concept in distribution spec today. So we would have to sort of invent that and specify it. Not that that means we shouldn't, but just that is, I do think that's a good scoping down of, indexing all annotations or indexing some annotations.
Yeah. And one of the things I think that kind of came up in our discussions as well. And the, having that as a field in the manifest is kind of one way to make that more consistent.
So I understand proposal E has a timestamp annotation, if I recall correctly, because one of the use cases that we had listed was the ability for registry providers to allow their users to set retention policies. And you can set retention policies based on the timestamp.
I believe that I'm looking at proposal E right now, I think the latest draft, and it says an artifact may have an annotation added with a timestamp version or similar value. These annotations could be queried, etc., but not that you should or must or have to have the timestamp field. It's sort of the same with an image today. You can also do this with an image today. You can put that in there and then filter on your way out.
Brandon?
I was just thinking, in addition to the timestamp, there was the thought I've seen a few times of how do you filter by who did the signing. So if you have multiple signers out there and you want to find year one signature, I'm just imagining there's going to be more and more filter scenarios that we didn't capture in our use cases here that people are going to want to ask later on.
Yeah, filtering definitely gets complex. I think that's why we need to shy away from it as much as possible. In particular, the signature case has a lot of corners, because currently for cosign, at least, you'd have to deeply inspect that image to even get any kind of identity out of it. And there may not be an identity like you expect there to be. It might not be, Brandon@mitchell.com. It might be this GitHub repo or this key anybody holds.
Might be a fingerprint on a key.
Yeah. So I think that's that's a very good example of a super complex maze I'd like to avoid completely. I think there is a use case for it, show me whether Brandon signed this. But I think that gets very complex and implementation specific. The specific one we've been talking about as the perhaps minimal available filtering thing was artifact type. And for that to motivate adding an artifact type to the image spec change, or to the artifact spec change. I guess I'm still, even with push date sorting, I'm not sure I'm convinced that it chops off enough things from the total list of, if I have 1,000 things referring to this image and 995 of them are vulnerability scans, that filtering is not like meaningful, or it's not as helpful as I think we think it is, and its implementation to support it.
So the way I had been thinking about this was there would be like many levels of filtering that do not need to be in the registry space, I guess in the registry domain. So you, for example, you would fetch a manifest, and then that manifest can go to some other thing that will do the filtering for you. But that's it seems to me, Jason, that is what you're proposing as well, like offload filtering to something else.
It kind of, at least, for the immediate future, that clients would have to go through every page of the results and hopefully not also have to go fetch another manifest to do any more filtering, but perhaps on from enough information in the descriptor to not have to go through. Laki, I don't know if you have an answer to this as well.
Actually, I do have the answer. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for asking. 31, the answer. It's actually 42. Sajay, can you just restate the question? I just want to make sure I get the spirit of it, then respond.
So the question was, we've dropped all of the filtering requirements in Proposal E. Should we have a minimal viable experience where if we have two different type of artifacts, we can at least get that set somehow, because we would attach signatures, SBOMs, vulnerability scans, and different things. Or should we just state that we'll pull down everything from the registry for a given image and then filter it on the client? Either way is okay. The only challenge is that adding a full-blown annotation filtering is just an expensive implementation problem. So I don't want to go there right now. Well, hopefully it not have to, but at least should we propose we start with something simple and then we add on more, keep going, or we kind of like say cut it off altogether so that we can agree on what's the path forward.
Thanks, Sajay. Just to respond to that, is what do you think the value of having it there is? That everybody follow it, or that people can kind of, if there's an MVP in there, that people can visualize how to create filtering from this? I'm just wondering, what is the purpose of having it codified in the proposal? Or what do you think the purpose is?
Okay, so I think the changes to the artifact spec or image spec is the toughest one, because it's about persistent documents. We can change the refers API however we want to, right? Because it's a get path. It's not going to affect it. But at the moment we kind of like try to ask customers, hey, you have to put yet another field, it becomes change of the persistent document, it changes the digest of the manifest and those kind of things. So codifying that requirement upfront enables us to at least use those things later on. But it doesn't solve all the cases. So it's about whether we agree that, okay, this is the minimum viable experience that we have, where we can store SBOMs and signatures and any other cool stuff related with the image. And then we can query them without polluting the whole pool of, I want to find signatures, but you're also giving me this ton of scan results or vulnerability results or whatever it is, right? So, and because sorting is also not there. So what's the minimum experience we can get to?
So I wanted to chime in on something that Jason was saying earlier, which was the fear that you might have to start pulling a bunch of manifest for things to start doing all the filtering. And the big reason I didn't push back too hard on this request was because at the client, if we pull up all the annotations from the manifest and put those in that descriptor list that we return back to the client should have all the details they need. And so I think we've got all the detail there to do the client side filtering with the minimal amount of data they have to do that.
Right, without having to fetch each manifest to get
It's
the
on the descriptor list. It's all been pulled up. And so the client's got everything they need, including the artifact type, including all of the other timestamps, key fields, any other details that are in there that are pushed up to annotations. They're all there at the client side to do that without any other request.
Sounds good. I think that means that we at least codify that implementation of the reference API should return all the annotations in the manifest level, right?
Yep, and it would just be, at that point, it's roughly static for the registry server. So hopefully that's less work on them. Every time they get a new manifest in, they just add one more descriptor to their list that they return for that one descriptor.
The challenge is we will have to either keep a side information of all the annotations which are unbounded, or you end up having to go through the manifest list or go through each manifest. So those are the implementation challenges that we'll have to think about. But if that's what the spec says, and that's what the spec says, and I'll probably leave it to John and Michael to describe, is that feasible from a cost perspective, or if it's not a problem, then we kind of agree it's okay, and let's make that the option.
I think that's also something we can suss out as we prototype and implement the extension, right? Like once we have it working with hoisting the annotations, we can do not exactly a load test, it's not a production service, but like what happens if I put 1,000 vulnerability scans? What happens? Can I pull out things of type signature without having to make 1,000 API calls?
Yeah, my hope that by making that without filters in there was that at least that list is static for the registry, so they only have to generate it once, or per every manifest, just append one entry in there. And so hopefully that's much less of a heavy lift for them than doing the on-the-fly filtering.
So again, we're almost coming to like 15 minutes to the top of the hour. Do we have consensus on whether to keep filtering or drop it altogether from the proposal? Sounds like yes.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Well, unless anyone disagrees.
Okay, well,
I mean,
Consensus
I'd love to
which
still
way?
have filtering, but it just sounds like it's
What
not.
did we just
non-starter.
decide?
I think I interpreted this as deciding not to implement filtering in the initial proposal we send to distribution spec. And
okay.
that if you wanted to filter, you should be able to do so at least on manifest annotations that get hoisted into the referrer's API response. So you
But
don't have
that's
to pull
all-
1,000 manifests.
That's all client side though.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we ever in the future add a server side? And I think that'll be a question for later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we'll move on to the next one, which is should we return referrers or leave it up to cloud providers to decide the impact of introducing it?
Sorry, what was that question?
It was
should-
continuing last week's question, which is we've added I believe,
Referrers to the image spec, yeah.
and what was the consensus was more like the question that I had is like, did we agree on saying that we would support it later at some point in time, or do we off the bat go say or do cloud providers have an option of saying, hey, we'll implement it, we might or might not implement it? What's the ask here? I think this is also important for both for me and Michael Brown to kind of at least understand if we bring a new image manifest, what should we do with it? And if we have old image manifests, what should we, how should we kind of reconcile it at some point in time? We could do like an alternate put, like ask the client to put it again, so that it actually triggers the workflow. But that's a tougher ask because you have to get the manifest correctly and put it back and refresh it somehow. So just to kind of like bring everybody to the same page.
Did my pull request give you a little bit happier thoughts on that one from what I was suggesting, which was that you only have to scan the stuff that has a digest tag on it. You don't have to scan your entire registry. You only have to scan those things that have the digest tag already pushed. My fear of pulling it out of image spec is that you lose that upgrade path, and I don't want to lose that upgrade path.
I see. So your recommendation is that if it's a digest tag, only then do we actually make this workflow happen?
Yeah, if the user hasn't pushed a digest tag, then it wouldn't work in the existing environment for stuff without the API. And so there's no reason to make it work with the API.
I'm okay. I think I just want to hear from Michael and John. So this path is okay.
And that's during the conversion. Once the conversion happens and the API is available, then you need to scan everything. Not everything pre-existing, but everything newly created.
Jason?
The clients have to scan everything, or as a registry operator, we would be doing like a backfill?
As
No,
a
I think-
registry operator, this is going forward. And so every new manifest that gets uploaded, once you have the API available, you would want to do the scan on. But existing manifests that were pushed before the API became available, you only need to scan the stuff that had that digest tag.
We talked about this last week, right? Or was it at the OCI, the Thursday call? I don't remember, but basically, I don't think there is any reason you have to do any kind of backfill. If you want to, I think a nice thing you could do is what Brandon's saying and scan for registry, digest tags and backfill those. But I think it's a reasonable expectation. As a user, it's a reasonable expectation to me that if I push something that the registry didn't understand 3 years ago, that they don't have to, when that gains meaning next week, they don't have to go back and make that meaningful for me.
I don't agree.
Sure.
Well,
I think the more important thing is you don't have to do a full backfill of every manifest in the entire universe, which I think
The reason
is
I'm going to
really
push for
scary.
the reason I'll push for the partial backfill is that as a client, if you query the registry and see the API, you shouldn't then also still go back and do the tag listing. You should be doing one or the other as the client. And so once the registry says, hey, I have the API available here, then you shouldn't have to go back and look for those tag digests anymore.
I think that's fair. I think that's also a business decision for each cloud provider registry to make on their own. I think, if you don't ever have to support referrers at all. You don't ever have to support OCI at all. If you don't want to, you can do your own thing. But
ECR is good because we won't accept these to begin with until we implement the API, right?
well, perfect. See, you've made the right decision for yourself. But yeah, I don't know that the working group has to come up with any official guidance for cloud provider registries or any registry implementation for as far as backfill. You can talk to Brandon and get, he can tell you what he thinks you should do, but that's not, I think, within the scope of the working group we're
Yeah,
currently
my
talking.
my big concern is if someone adopts this a year later, not if they do this
Yeah.
2 months from now. And so if it's been a year later and there's been a lot of stuff that's built up over that time, I don't want to break all the user workflows that we're saying, let's assume a registry is one or the other.
Yeah, that is the most painful possible pain point, which is I can push these around between ECR and ACR just fine, and they know what it means. And then in a year, GCR, I'll pick on John, in a year, GCR picks up semantic meaning for this field. And the experience is bad because I have been able to push them between these two just fine and get all the good new stuff. And over there, it doesn't, or they have to do that's all the more reason to upgrade faster, right? So that your backfill window is shorter and shorter. We have a carrot and a stick.
I think
I get
at the end of the day, like it's going to be something that each registry has to decide.
Yeah.
For their customers, what sort of level of support they want to give to that upgrade.
Yeah.
But I think we're leaving it as it's a known cost to the registry because you can look at how many digest tags are sent there. So you know how much you're going to have to do the indexing that's say on your registry. And you're not forced to do this at any one point in time. You can pick your upgrade window whenever you think makes the most sense for your registry.
Sounds like there's consensus on, I'm not even going to say what the consensus is anymore. Jason, I'm gonna
think it's
pick on
on
you.
clients not not having to try both. Like clients not having to fall back would be the
I don't
something
want-
that we would write in the spec for how
Well,
to use this API.
I don't want 5 years from now to hit a registry that has the API and still go back and do a tag listing.
yeah. Right. Fallback is fine, but not both. You shouldn't have to do the good path and the old path. I think that's a goal.
Okay.
yeah.
I guess that's the end of the agenda items. Does anyone want to discuss some more, or shall I give?
Can
10 minutes back?
I just ask, this is going to be revisiting something, unfortunately, but artifact type filtering, I didn't feel like, I don't think that, I think it's a really important thing to have. And I guess I didn't feel as though everybody was okay with dropping that. But maybe I was wrong.
Does it need to be a separate field done on the server side, or can it be an annotation that's done on the client side? Because if it can be an annotation that's done on the client side within that descriptor, then I think we're getting that without having to do any special case.
So, okay, so that would mean in the list of descriptors we're returning, we're lifting out specific annotations or all annotations.
I'd love to see all annotations.
I
Ideally.
understand it was all from our previous discussions.
Okay, and at that point, annotations can be pretty big.
Indeed, yeah.
Registries can implement checks on the size of annotations if they're worried about them being big. And should.
They will get big, yeah.
I think one of the things that with SBOMs and maybe signatures is like they're just storing data in those annotations.
That isn't, I would say that is an anti-pattern that registries can block people from doing, right? I can already do that today.
I agree that it's an anti-pattern. I don't know if I feel as though I would be very successful in introducing that limitation.
So I would
Something we
predict,
previously didn't limit.
I would predict that if the annotations get like really large, then folks would stick all of that metadata in another artifact and make a reference to that instead.
When it gets big enough, it should be a blob, not an annotation.
Yeah.
Then you're not doing anything within the manifest. We still have the 4 megabyte limit.
Yeah.
You're free to set it less if you really want to. Just realize you're going to break migration paths for users.
We also talked in that discussion about the 4 megabyte manifest limit, or about specific limits to annotations that, I think along the same lines in the language of implementations may reject annotation values over 1K or over 1 megabyte or, something like that. I think if you're worried about annotation size ballooning, I can already push the collected works of Shakespeare in an annotation in an image, and you can't stop me. And and you should be able to stop me. I'm saying, like, that's a ludicrous thing. You should be able to stop me. But yeah,
No one can stop Jason.
no one can stop.
No.
I'll just chunk it into 2 or 3 different annotations. It's fine.
Right. I'm already imagining dot one, .2.
Distributed across like 1,000 or something SBOM documents.
Exactly.
Lucky
You got it.
Lucky has his hand up. Go ahead, Lucky.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what is the kind of rationale to relegating so much heavy lifting to annotations? I've just seen this movie before in Kubernetes.
I don't think
Ingress.
we're talking about, or we're definitely not recommending, and I don't think we're even worried about large documents in annotations.
Well, it's just like, using annotations in general to do heavy lifting and not putting first class fields and specifications. I've just seen that pattern. We're basically going to relegate a lot of heavy lifting to annotations, which doesn't give us early validation, doesn't give us typing, we've got, and people will shove objects in there, JSON objects, I've seen it all the time. JSON, you will become a manifest.
I will be doing
and
that,
your
yeah.
buddies. But I'm just, if I take into context the new manifest type, if there's any fields we want to add there, we should add them now while we're building something. If we're retrofitting image spec, I understand we have to do more heavy lifting in annotations because
And
we
that's
don't
the
want to mess
reason.
with descriptors. You're basically shoehorning the new manifest with the old stuff, the burdens of the sins of the past, so that you can have annotations match annotations and old and new.
Yeah, but the
No?
logic was I looked at what we had to start with the image spec and what we could add in there and make work. And then we kind of shoehorn what we could in there. And then I looked at all the other things that we want to try to do if it worked with annotations. And I think we can do most 95% of what we're trying to do with annotations without getting any more complicated than that. I could put that in image spec, and then since we already had over there, why reinvent the wheel a different way when we had our different artifact type?
No,
So
totally.
Brandon,
I get that.
and Lucky, I'm sorry for interrupting.
You don't have your hand up.
I
Gotta call
am
police.
chair. I am
Okay,
chair.
I'll back down. You just
And-
use the whip on me.
And there is 3 more minutes, and Jesse just put his hand up. I would like to give him an opportunity to say his
I was gonna add color to what Lucky said. I'm there, so I'm gonna give my time to others.
I'm sorry, Lucky. Go ahead and chat.
No, sorry. And I, respect the chair too. So hopefully that didn't come off bad. If it did, I apologize. I just have seen this movie before where basically I've always thought of annotations as a place to experiment until you get first class fields, and you should move to first class fields because non-typed annotations is just, and if we're imparting that behavior in people that, hey, just shove everything into annotations and you got a 4 meg limit, never having a continuum to cleave out annotations into first class fields where we have the opportunity to do that. It's just
So,
setting precedent. That's all I'm saying.
With 2 minutes left here, what would a first class field look like? Would it look like something different than an annotation to do the filtering?
Well,
We
you
need
could
the
have a
artifact
type
type.
on artifact type is probably the one that we're talking about. And you could have strict
But then
typing.
would that be a specific strict field or whatever value for each different thing you want to filter on? And so you have to make an artifact type, you have to make a created time, you have to create each individual field that you want to filter on. There will be no free form filters for users.
I think the only one in question right now is, I'm not saying every annotation that we could ever becomes a field, but the artifact type was in proposal A and it was dropped down to an annotation. I think Michael was asking why.
Yeah, and I think my big concern with just lifting the annotations and putting it into the responses is just with basically we now have unbounded, response items. And sure, maybe your artifact type becomes like a 6 the full works of Shakespeare, but I think that typically having a single field for this and not just lifting all of the all of the annotations into this response will allow us to provide a little more, useful information for clients.
There's still the 4 meg limit. And if they start throwing a whole bunch of stuff in annotations, they're going to start paging like crazy for all the responses. So I'm hoping there is some positive feedback for the users to do the right thing.
So we're out of time. Do we want to continue this conversation next week? This bit about annotations and how to migrate them into filtering paths.
I would
Or-
like to separate the conversation about field versus annotation from the conversation about filtering. I think we mostly agreed, correct, you have no time to disagree with me. We mostly agreed that filtering is out of scope. But the annotation versus artifact type actual field is, I think, a discussion worth having in the future.
Okay, I'll
we-
just put that in for next week and call it good.
Yeah, we also don't have to wait till next week if you want to ping me on Slack and we can hash it out there or talk later. We don't have to talk once a week. I miss you all week. I have
Me
to get
too.
my
The one question I'll throw out real quick while people are still here. Any objections to hit and merge on that PR? for this one. I just saw
Oh,
two
please.
thumbs up on it.
Please do.
I approve, merge it.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
See you later.
folks. Thanks for chairing.
Thanks,
Nisha.
everyone. Thank you, Lucky.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.